Werewolves on the Run. Escape from Werewolf Lab 2. Samson and Magnus battle on. Dear Scary Stories NYC, thank you for running my previous email to you. And thank you to your viewers for their responses and offers to put us up. Before I respond in full with some new anecdotes about the two of us, I'd like to reiterate my warning from the previous episode. I'm about to tell you some real stories from my life, but if I were you, I'd label this as fiction, or for entertainment purposes only, or whatever you have to say, because this is some secret information I'm about to share. It's a story of government corruption to a level that might truly surprise you. Things are about to get so much worse than people know. It's nothing that humanity, and Americans in particular, could ever have imagined being done to them by their own leaders. My only hope is that they allow this message to get out through your channel, thinking that it will seem like a made-up story presented in this context. If anyone tried to put this on the news, there would be negative repercussions, believe me. As for those offering to let us stay at their places, you should know it could cause you to end up on some list. I'm going to tell you a story about a woman who helped us out before I get to the main stuff I'd like to talk about this time. So if you haven't seen the first episode, I'm going by the code name Samson, and Magnus is what the lab techs called my dogman friend. Or possibly he's my werewolf friend, I don't know, because he doesn't speak to me. He does seem intelligent, and he does understand things that people say. At least I think he does. It seems he does. Magnus and I met in a lab where we were both being experimented on. I caught something that made me sick, and I shouldn't have been able to catch this particular illness. So that made me interesting to these people from powerful places. They got my parents to sign my life over to them. And the next thing I knew, they were giving me a blood transfusion in a secret lab with a dogman or werewolf. It helped cure me of the illness, but it also gave me a metabolism like a werewolf, and I need to cut my hair and beard daily. I also look older than my age. I'm not sure if I am actually aging faster now or what. I don't become a werewolf, or at least I haven't yet, so there's that. I do seem to heal better than before. The reason I say Magnus may be a werewolf or maybe an intelligent dogman is that I've never seen him transform or change at all. He's always this big giant man-like dog who has my back. We help each other stay alive, which is not always the easiest thing to do. Now, I want to say that Magnus the Dogman is the friendliest person of any species that I have ever known. I want to say that, but actually, he's a killer. At least I think he might be. But it's not like I'm going to say or do anything about it. Let me tell you this short story before we get to the real story. And you tell me what you think about our 12-foot-tall hairy friend. So Magnus and I were walking through the woods, and I accidentally began walking out into a woman's backyard. It was overgrown and hadn't been tended to in a long time, so I actually thought I was still in the woods, until I came upon the lady sitting in a lawn chair by a rusted metal table, looking sad and distracted. "Oh, sure, just walk through my yard," she said sarcastically. "It won't be mine for too much longer anyhow." She and I got to talking, and Magnus was in the bushes watching and listening. She said she was going to lose her house, in spite of the fact that she had paid her mortgage. There was a corrupt banker who refused to accept the payment that she had given to his assistant. The assistant presented this man with all the proof he needed, but this was a petty and spiteful man. She told us that he had once asked this lady out many years prior, and she had said no. The banker set out to ruin her life, and the life of any man she got close to. In spite of all his persecution, she had raised every single penny she needed to buy her house outright and own it for herself. The evil banker was powerful enough to overrule reality itself. And now she was going to have to move. She couldn't afford to take it to court, so she was going to lose her only possession, the home that she had always lived in. Well, the lady shared her food with me. She gave Magnus all the rest of her recently passed German Shepherd's dog food, and she allowed us to sleep out behind her house. In return, we sat in rapt attention as she told us the stories of her life. No matter how that banker had ruined each of her dreams in succession, she was still full of joy as she recounted each one of her one-time hopes. I admired her strength and positivity, and I wished I could do something for her. It came time for us to move on, and as we were preparing to leave, the lady got a telephone call. She said it was from the bank, so she had to pick up. I saw how tense and sad she got, and I heard her hopeless voice say hello to whoever was on the other side. Magnus and I backed away to allow her some space. Well, I was surprised when she came back to us in a state of some mild shock. It seems the gentleman banker who had ruined her life was no longer what? I asked. Was no longer with us, she replied. Well, where did he go? I asked. To meet his maker, she responded, as surprised by her words as I was. It turned out the banker had suffered some kind of strange animal attack in the night, and now he was no longer. In his place at the bank was now the assistant who the lady had paid the last of her mortgage to. So that meant she wasn't going to lose her home. We said goodbye and parted company, and I noticed that Magnus did not seem as surprised about what had happened as we two humans had been. Now, I don't want to accuse him of anything, but I do wonder about that big beast. What are his limits? When he and I have fought together, I've seen him look to disarm opponents and render them helpless. I have not seen him be unnecessarily cruel or violent or harsh. So maybe the banker just ran into a pack of wild stray dogs. It happens, you know. Maybe it was a bear. Maybe Magnus had nothing at all to do with it. Now I'll tell you about someone I know Magnus ran into, because I was there. This story starts off with the two of us walking off-trail through the woods, and coming across this nutjob steroid freak, who looked like he walked out of an old episode of Hercules or Xena from the 80s. I'm an expert on 80s TV, because my dad only allowed me to watch his kid-safe collection of VHS tapes throughout my childhood, and all of that was taped off the TV when he was younger. So for those of you with more normal parents, what I'm trying to say is this guy looked like he was some kind of primitive warrior, with leather straps over his shoulders and arm bracers made for battling or something. But the most theatrical and ridiculous part of his getup was that he was wearing what looked to be a thick and heavy metal helmet that covered his entire face, except for some slits for breathing and peeking out. The helmet looked like a giant bullet, or something. I think I said, "What the hell is that?" or something to that effect, and the guy stopped short. He looked from me to Magnus, my werewolf companion, then back to me, and I drew in some air to call out to him. Before I could say anything, though, he darted away from us at lightning speed into the deeper woods out of our view. Magnus and I looked at each other, and I shrugged my shoulders. Maybe Halloween came early this year. We resumed walking forward for a few steps when our bullet-headed friend came running back out onto the grass in front of us. This time the big freak brought an even larger, even freakier friend with him. He brought something the size of Magnus, but it wasn't hairy, and it wasn't a werewolf. This was like a humanoid version of an alligator, almost, but fancier looking, I guess you could say. The head would have more resembled a salamander, but a salamander with teeth like something out of a Godzilla movie. The creature reminded me of stories I had heard about a lizard man that I think they said lived in Florida. I sort of wondered if that was what I was seeing. Except this one seemed to be partnered up with the stupid-looking guy wearing the metal helmet over there. You know, I was starting to tell you before about how my father felt that children's programming of my youth mostly sucked, so he would force me to watch his old VHS tapes of kids and science fiction TV shows, which he recorded off TV back in the 80s. He considered those good for me, but the end result is it causes me to make references to things that nobody knows about anymore. Like when I saw this upright walking lizard larger than a man, my first thought was, there's a slee stack from Land of the Lost. Actually, they did a remake of that in movie form, so maybe you do know what a slee stack is, possibly. This lizard dinoid also reminded me of the Gorn from the original Star Trek TV show. I mean, how the Gorn looked in the version my dad taped in the 80s. I heard they fixed the special effects more recently, but I'm trying to say he looked like a big guy wearing a rubber suit to me. This lizard man didn't look real, but he was too large to be a man in a suit. He looked a few feet taller than Bullethead Man, and that guy had a good foot or two on me. I don't actually know my height at the time this story took place, but I have noticed I am growing a tiny bit each month. I was a short, skinny guy, 5'10" before this started, and I was 6'3" last week, so I was probably around 6 foot at the time this confrontation happened. That's just a guess, honestly, as I had a lot on my mind in those days. So at around 6 feet, I would have been the shortest person involved in this encounter. That's my main point. The muscle-bound human was speaking to me, but his stupid bullet-shaped metal helmet was muffling what he was saying. I interrupted his mumbling to tell him just that. He shouted at me to come closer then. I shouted at him to speak louder instead. This guy seemed quite familiar with me, and with Magnus as well. His voice almost sounded familiar, and I started to wonder if he was someone I knew as well as he knew me. I wondered if he might be one of those lab techs or doctors or whatever they were that had experimented on me and Magnus in the lab, making us the way we are now. I wonder if maybe this guy had also given himself a werewolf blood transfusion, like he had given me. Or maybe he mixed his blood with that of his slee-stack friend over there. When I finally deciphered this guy's message, the gist of it was this: my champion versus yours. If my lizard man wins, you come back into custody. Custody. So he was sent after us. That was why he knew who we were. And if Magnus wins, I asked? Silence. That meant if Magnus won, Bulletbrain was still going to try to bring us both back under custody. Custody of who? Or what? I wondered if even he knew. Well, I wanted to negotiate further with Buckethead, but the two non-humans in our midst seemed to have decided that they were going to fight no matter what the humans had to say about it. There was a sort of a clearing, with a couple of trees in the center of it. The lizard man tore a large branch off the one tree and hurled it at Magnus, who ducked and dodged the flying projectile. The big wolf man then pulled the other tree up by its roots and used it to bat the lizard into the bushes, where it landed on its lizard tail and let out a pathetic squawk. I couldn't help but belly laugh as the lizard man lifted his dirt and root-covered head up out of those bushes, hissing and making some nasty kind of sound that I guess was his version of a growl, maybe. The lizard seemed very slow-moving, and I didn't think we'd be in for much of a battle, but the reptile was capable of short bursts of speed so lightning fast that it made my wolfen friend appear to be moving in slow motion by comparison. Magnus would need to move in to make an attack, and when he did, the lizard would be waiting, ready to pummel him 2 times for every 1 blow the werewolf landed. And the lizard was able to cut my friend as well, easier than I had seen any opponent be able to do that before. Of course, Magnus and I both have healing abilities far beyond what most living things can ever experience, so I didn't expect him to have too much trouble defeating this Sleestack character. But he wasn't having an easy time of it, and I would even say that the stupid rubber-looking gator man was starting to get the best of my friend. Bullet Bonnet seemed to notice the same thing. He walked over toward me in a threatening manner, trash-talking me as he approached. I think that guy watched too many Fast and Furious movies or something. He was trying to insult me to goad me into a fight. Now, let me tell you something about myself. I have not been a big guy for very long, and it wasn't even my decision to become the way I am now. I used to be scrawny and weak, and I am not a fighter. Even now that I have the strength of several men combined, I avoid fighting if I possibly can. And if I must, my plan is to end the fight as quickly as I can, while harming myself and my opponent as little as I can manage. I don't start fights, and I don't let insults get me angry enough to join a fight. When you get angry, you get sloppy, and my only advantage over this bigger and stronger guy was to hope that I was the smarter of the two. Getting angry would make me stupid. So he could insult me, my father, Thomas Jefferson, Jesus, or anyone or anything else. And I was just going to study the insult to see what it could tell me about his weaknesses. He wanted me to be hot-headed like Captain Kirk, which meant it was time for me to distance myself emotionally and focus on being a tactician, like Mr. Spock. Bullethead guy was going to be trying to headbutt me. If he succeeded, no amount of healing ability was going to prevent me from going unconscious for at least a small period of time. That helmet looked to be an inch thick all the way around, and I could already feel what the broken nose was going to feel like if he smashed into me from the front, which is why when he surprised me by leaping into the air, not at me, but to my right at a young tree, grabbing the narrow trunk with both hands and slingshotting himself all the way around the tree until both his boots landed solidly on my face, I had no reaction. Well, I did have a reaction. I flew sideways into a more mature tree, which did not bend at all when I slammed into it. My original self would have probably already expired by this point, but I only had the wind taken out of me. I needed to catch my breath. I was defenseless in the moment, and my opponent seemed to be laughing at me. Or maybe he was saying something, who could tell with that stupid helmet over his mouth. I heard Magnus howling, and it broke my heart, while filling me with fear. I had heard my friend howl on multiple occasions, but never in the pained way in which I was hearing it this time. I looked over and the lizard reptile thing seemed to have turned the tide. It was not as fast, not as agile, not as intelligent as Magnus, but it never tired. It just kept going at the same rate, and it felt no remorse whatsoever for whatever horrible and cruel things it did. Magnus's howl grew so loud that it hurt my ears, and I took it as the death cry of my good friend. In the next moment, though, I heard howls coming in return from every direction. Some sounded far away, but not all of them. Magnus was calling in reinforcements. Knowing that help was on the way, reinvigorated my werewolf friend and myself as well, but it caused the lizard creature to look around nervously. The helmet head guy started mumbling something at the lizard and gesturing, but when the first canine raced into the clearing in a foamy-mouthed rage, the lizard man began squawking in a sound almost more like a bird than like any reptile I've ever heard before. I saw a stray dog, not a wolf, and then another stray of a different breed, and then a third, this one wearing a collar with jangling dog tags. Then I saw two wolves launch themselves at Bulletface, and our two would-be jailers ran off out of our sight. I wonder if the lizard man can call on lizards to help him in battle, the way Magnus called canines in on that night. If you're in the Midwest, there are going to be more wolves, coyotes, and random dogs. Then there are going to be very scary kinds of lizards. I mean, unless the lizard man can unleash a rain of frogs or something. I have little doubt that we'll run into those two again, although it hasn't happened yet. I have to go perform a favor for someone who is doing a favor for us, so this email will have to end now. Please thank your listeners if they are still listening this far into my talking about myself, and also thank them for all their wishes of good luck. The two of us are certainly gonna need it. Well, those of you who read the comments know that Kathy Barrickman says she's not doing well. Kathy is one of the nicest people on the internet, and she's always been so supportive of this channel. I don't know what to do to help her, except to send positive thoughts her way, and ask any of you who are so inclined to do the same. If that's not your thing, I understand, but if you like to pray, I hope you might consider adding our Kathy to those prayers. I hope you're okay, Kathy. We're sending our best wishes and hopes to you. And now here's our little friend Henry to do the house cleaning. Hank? Thanks, Biggie. And thanks to all of you for watching this far. If you liked it, please click like. If you'd like to see more of our work, please subscribe. And also click that bell icon if you'd like to be notified when we put out a new episode. To become an executive producer, you can donate to us through the thanks button under each of our videos, or through our paypal.me/PeterBernard209 page. To receive cool perks like secret uncensored Dogman episodes far too wild to ever run on this channel, you can become a YouTube channel member by clicking the join button, or join our PayPal subscribers club at peterbernard.com. Joining either at the $3 a month level or above gets you access to our over 25 hours of secret uncensored Dogman stories available nowhere else. Do you have a scary story about Dogman or some other kind of high strangeness that happened to you? Let us know by emailing us at scarystoriesnyc@gmail.com or by leaving us a voicemail message at 804-LA-SCARY. You may need to call back on that when it cuts off after I think 3 minutes. And if you don't want to do any of that stuff, thank you for simply watching to the end. Good night, and have a scary tomorrow.
Come back for more scary stories.